Foi um processo muito rápido de construção deste dia do design, aqui na PUC, realizado em colaboração com o Instituto Italiano de Cultura. Muito rápido, no sentido que estamos correndo há praticamente um mês para realizar tudo. E muito produtivo, porque realmente estou muito satisfeito com os resultados. E muitas pessoas envolvidas, eu gostaria de agradecê-las todas, mas não vou conseguir. Então, agradeço todas e todos os colegas do departamento, agradeço ao nosso diretor, o Gamba, o meu grande parceiro, o Cláudio, a Camila, que cuidou da comunicação, né, do evento. Também agradecemos todos nós, os que mencionei, aos colegas do Solar, que disponibilizaram o espaço e foram muito gentis em nos acolher, aos colegas do Instituto Italiano de Cultura e do Consulado, aqui representados pelo Ricardo, e finalmente aos nossos parceiros, né, internacionais, especificamente a Nina Bassoli, a qual ocupa uma posição relevante na Triennale di Milano, curadora de tudo o que é relativo à arquitetura, regeneração urbana e cidades. Ela é arquiteta, com graduação pelo Politécnico de Milão, que é também a minha alma mater, e doutorado pelo Instituto Universitário de Arquitetura de Veneza. Eu sou de Veneza também. Não sei se você nasceu em Veneza, na verdade. Não, né? Milão, tá, perfeito. Enfim, compartilhamos bastante em termos de cidades. Hoje ela atua como pesquisadora e curadora na Triennale di Milano, que é um importante centro de exposições que realmente agora vocês vão conhecer. Eu espero que um dia vocês possam visitar. Aliás, é esse o convite, né? Integra a equipe editorial da Lotus International há praticamente 15 anos, desde 2008. Realizou conferências em várias universidades e instituições internacionais e fui curadora de inúmeras publicações e exposições. Entre elas, Architecture as Art, num centro expositivo de Milão que se chama Pirelli Hangar Bicocca, e City After the City, Street Art, na mesma Triennale. E, entre outras, né? Inclusive, ela está me dizendo agora que a programação para 2023 e para 2024 é muito, muito rica. Gente, vamos acolhê-la com um aplauso. Nina, por favor.
Obrigada, boa tarde. Fico muito, muito feliz de ser aqui essa tarde com vocês. Muito obrigada à PUC para organizar isso, todos os professores, todos os estudantes, mas sobretudo. Muito, muito obrigada também ao Instituto Italiano de Cultura, Ricardo, Lívia, pela organização dessa palestra e da exposição aqui, que é um grandíssimo, enorme prazer para nós outros ter aqui toda a história de um século de Triennale. Eu falo um pouco português, como vocês entendem, mas não muito bem. Então, se pode ser para vocês, propongo de falar em inglês, que é um pouco mais rápido. Eu posso falar um pouco com um ritmo um pouco mais sustenido, mas com perguntas e dúvidas que podemos compartilhar em português ou como quiserem. Muito obrigada. Então, vou começar. So, shift to English, always the strange moment, changing the language. As well said in the introduction, I'm honored to have the possibility to talk about the Triennale who is the institution who hosts me as a curator and responsible and chef, let's say, of the architectural department, which is architecture and urban regeneration city. So it is already quite multidisciplinary with several inputs. I'm at the Triennale since not a long time, less than 1 year. I started working there as a responsible of the sector in May 2022, but I had the opportunity to curate the exhibition there before, so I know the place quite well. And also, I was born in Milan. I'm from Milan, so I know that place since I was a child, because of course, Triennale this year is going to celebrate the centenary, 100 year. So quite an old lady, and has been always a super important center for the city, and also I have to say honestly for all Italy. Maybe in Europe it is as well a quite interesting institution. In the world maybe not yet, but I'm super honored to be here to talk with you about it. And the interesting thing of the Triennale is that the building itself, it is quite, let's say, monumental, coming from the 30s, with a, let's say, a fascist style, quite monumental. But the multidisciplinary approach and the quantity of activities that are inside made the place very open also to discussion, debates, and to the mixture of disciplines and things. And this is something very important to me. So I'm curator for architecture, but we share the position of the curatorial position with colleagues from other disciplines. So there is Marco Sammicheli for design, who is the curator of this wonderful exhibition, and of course I thank him. And he's also the director of the Museum of Design, the Design Museum, which is actually the only, let's say, permanent thing inside the Triennale. But also the Design Museum, which is a collection that the Triennale had owned, but also that collection always change in order to changing the narration around the object. So there are more than 3,000 objects in the collection, but for each exhibition, almost every year or every couple of years, change in order to cross other kind of narratives and problems as well, why not? So this is something very important, because you have always the same object, but you can interpret it in a completely different way if you see another perspective. And also, we have a theater with a curator of the theater activities, with a festival which is super international, and this is something that stimulated a lot the debate and the relationship with performative arts and other kind of vision for architecture, for space, for designing objects, and so on. And the exhibitions as well are, about design. This is Castiglioni, about architecture. You can have an exhibition about, a master of architecture, but also with, let's say, very experimental and pushing strategies in order to trying to do something new. This is an exhibition of a couple of years ago, maybe 3. It was built inside the palace, a skate park made by a Korean artist, Young-Woo Chun. And you could go there with a skate and perform skateboarding. And this was, a tentative of trying to use the space in a different way and try to start a debate on public space, on community, on sharing a physical engagement on space with other tools that are not always the representation of the projects. And with this we come, of course, the garden, the event, the public program, but okay. And this brings us to talking about the main thing that the Triennale always had, which is the international exhibition. What is the international exhibition? Is an expo, something that is, I mean, all over the world, something that is hosted by the Bureau International des Expositions, and is an occasion in which, around the theme, which is set up, a specific theme, nations from all over the world participate with different institutions. Can be a public institution, a university, of course, why not, a school or a museum, but maybe 50s, 60s, 70s, or also hundreds of nations participate all together exploring that theme. And this happened at the Triennale starting from 1923, so 100 years ago. And why I'm saying that this is very important? Because for Triennale, this has always been a tool for, of course, interrogate about themes, but also interrogate about how to exhibit difficult things to expose, like architecture, for instance. How can you exposing architecture? How can you exhibit architecture? Architecture is something that lay there. I mean, you cannot bring it in a wall as a painting or a work of art. You have to mediate it with pictures, with drawings, with models maybe, or also with other ideas that can bring themes, topics, and perception around architecture to the debate. And this is something in which Triennale always works a lot. For instance, this is an interesting structure made temporary for one of those international exhibitions, by Aldo Rossi in that case, which is a sort of triangular tube. We changed the access to the palace and transform it completely, and it is an installation, an exhibition of architecture, an exhibition of design, and also a performative situation. Or this is Giorgio De Chirico, a sculptor, great artist, which designed a fountain for the garden, which is already there, that changed the perception of the garden and make it a sort of a part of the museum. So this is just a few examples. This was the last international exhibition, just closed a couple of months ago. And the topic was quite interesting and challenging and strange. The title was Unknown Unknowns, an introduction to mysteries. So it wasn't exactly about architecture or design or art, but about the mystery, which is something that each designer should think about, because you can control what you are drawing, you can control what you want to do with your project, but there is always a part that you cannot control. So this was a sort of starting point for a reflection also bigger than that, about space, about universe, about the great topic that, for that case, for instance, allow also the scientific disciplines to come into the world of art with, again, an innovative program, let's say. And here we come to the exhibition and to the topic, which is, I mean, super simple, but so sweet and interesting. We have a center of history, and you can tell about this history just putting all together all the manifests, all the cartazes, and you can see how that history developed, and how society changed, and how the question about society changed, and how Triennale has always been a tool for investigate the change in society. So the question is always not what I mean, what is the state of art of design? But what is design for? What do we need to design with all our disciplines? And this is a bit the, let's say, the question that each international exhibition every 2 and 3 years ask to the public. So these are the main manifestos, which are especially that one of the Triennale and Biennale, and then in the exhibition there are also a little bit of more wide range of exhibitions, because starting from the first one, 1923, at the very beginning, the whole institution was based on that international exhibition. So it was biennial at the beginning. It wasn't in that palace, but in another city on the north of Milan for the first few editions. And the exhibition were biennial and were set up for 2 years. So there weren't temporary exhibitions in the meanwhile, but there were something for 2 years talking about the topic. And of course, at the beginning of the 20s, there was ideas about the decorative arts and also the capability, the capacity of the craft and the techniques to develop in the decorative art, in the interior design, on the home, and so on. And then you can see changing time, how change, let's say, the style somehow, the graphic and the vision of the language, and also the themes and the ideology, let's say, that brings around the biennial and triennial. Here, for instance, is the 4th international exhibition. I will go through the participation of Brazil, which are 3. Here you have the, let's say, the mark, but we will see it later. And of course, here we are in the 30s, so the period is, for Italy, very clear, the period where the fascist was at his let's say, period of main power, and so were the Triennial and Biennial also trying to push on this kind of values, let's say, no? So this is, for instance, the manifesto made by Mario Sironi, a wonderful artist. Also, manifestos were made by incredible artists as piece of art, with the capability of talking by themselves, and with themes that you can see, style and civiltà, civic engagement, which of course you can read it in several ways, but in that case was with a very engagement in the term of what ideology of Italy, of fascist Italy, could teach to the world. So it is always quite delicate talking about that period. And in occasion of the 5th Triennale was also opened the palace that I show you at the beginning, designed by Giovanni Muzio. That was inside, let's say, the idea of the exhibition. Because at that time, starting from that 5th Triennale, for the exhibition weren't exhibited just the interior of the houses and furniture and so on. But the idea was to start to show architecture in itself. So they started to build proper houses inside the park in 1-to-1 scale that you could go there and visit and try and experiences. So the idea the question, the difficult question to how to exhibit architecture had a very, let's say, simple and straight answer with architecture, 1-to-1 scale, made by the greatest architects that were active in that period. So again, continuity and modernity, the themes, let's say, very strong for the ideology, order and tradition. We are always in this mood, and here we are in the 40. And then suddenly, 1947, The war, the Second World War is finished in 1945, and this is the first Triennale after the war, and also after fascism, with the new, with democracy, you know, with the new world, with the new values. And which is the theme, the topic for that? Housing. So the exhibition made by a public institution, by a cultural institution, is about the proper reconstruction. So the idea is to make the exhibition, the international exhibition, so the cultural encounter between nations, building houses, building architecture one-to-one scale, but for that time, in a permanent way, and for the real reconstruction after the war, because Milan was super bombed and destroyed. And so they built up an entire neighborhood whose name is QT8, Quartiere Neighborhood of the 18th Triennale, which is already there, super nice, interesting, and valuable neighborhood built up by the most clever mind of the period and the architects in an experimental way. And this, I think that nowadays, until today, it is a super interesting and, let's say, challenging and wonderful operation. You build up an exhibition, which is something temporary, which is something for culture, and you build up a part of the city, something real to the people for living there. Then we go through with completely different themes, more about the boom, the economy, the change, and you see also the graphic that change and the mood, the language. This is Roberto Sambonè, a wonderful Italian artist who lived a lot in Brazil, in the Rio de Janeiro as well. And the topics are home and schools, so all topic more related with the society and the changing around society. And this is another beautiful exhibition with the participation of Brazil, we will see later, with a manifesto by Massimo Vignelli, wonderful graphic designer, about the free time. So the topics also start being more conceptual, more philosophical, and less, let's say, typological. What is, as a theme, the free time? I mean, it is not the house, it is not the school. It is a reflection on society, a critique also a bit, but we'll see it later. Albe Steiner with another super interesting exhibition curated by Giancarlo De Carlo, the Green Number. This exhibition was great, super beautiful, but no one had the opportunity to see it because it was 1968, and the students occupy the museum. And so, the exhibition was almost finished, but they saw it, but the public never entered to see it. So, other interesting thing where history crossed the Triennale history. 15 with another interesting graphic design, and so on. I cannot explain everything because we got mad. And then the topics start to be also not just on the house, but on city and metropolis. So the cities in the world and the future of metropolis. So it is not anymore, no longer just Italy, no longer just house, no longer even just reconstruction in Italy, but the future of metropolis all over the world. So the topic, let's say, are bigger and bigger and explode a bit in more complex themes, like going, for instance, the relationship between construction, life, and nature. So also nature come abruptly in the scene at the beginning of the 90s. Again, identity and differences, so philosophical themes. Here again, the participation of Brazil, And we came to the last one, let's say the more recent one, with Broken Nature, again with the topic of nature and the fragility of our relationship with nature. And this wonderful manifesto by Anna Kuleshev, the exhibition created by Paolo Antonelli, and the last one that we saw at the beginning with the graphic by 244 and the topic of mystery. So you can see how just with an image, which is the extreme synthesis of something that has a duration of 3 years, so with a participation from all over the world, hundreds of nations, thousands of designers, of course, because I mean, in general, there are, I never counted, but thousands, of course, people working there. And you can make a synthesis just in one image, or at least I hope, and this is the meaning of the exhibition. So I thought that for have a few examples, we could talk about the participations of Brazil, which are unfortunately not so much. There are just 3, and hopefully we could hope to a next participation soon. Also because they are just 3, but they are in 3 completely different periods, around 30 years of distance, so this would be the perfect 4th. And so it is a good case study for seeing how things have changed. The first one is, as I mentioned, in occasion of the 4th International Exhibition. We are in the 1930 delicate period in Italy and in Brazil as well. The exhibition was prepared a couple of years before, so it is before the changing of the policy here. But it is an interesting case because the participation is related to a school, the Liceu de Artes e Ofícios de São Paulo. And so it was a sort of workshop where a series of Italian architect, designers, and artists were to that school bringing craftsmen from Italy and working together with craftsmen from Brazil and with students. So it was a sort of school of experimentation with a duration of a couple of years, where the main architect from Italy, the art director, let's say, was Tommaso Buzzi, a completely mad, eclectic architect, very strange. And he designed up this sort of funny drawing for wood, basically wood and other materials, but basically wood, with essence from Brazil, from different parts of Brazil. And this is, you see, a sort of optical design with parts of a fictional dinner that are laid on the pavement, an interesting design. And you see furniture, but also with this topic of nature, flowers, always a bit a reflection between tradition and modernity, as always in this kind of thing. And you can see also a bit which was how was the mood of that biennial at the beginning of the century. Sort of reconstruction of environment of houses with furniture, one-to-one scale, but just of the interiors. So this was a bit the theme. The second participation, which is wonderful, it's inside the Triennale of the Free Time, which is one of my best, I have to say. I love that Triennale. That Triennale was, first of all, curated by a couple, very strange couple, of great people. One is an architect, Vittorio Gregotti, who is a very famous architect in Italy. And the other one was a philosopher, Umberto Eco, a great philosopher that maybe you heard about. I think it is one of the most famous Italian intellectuals in the world. And they work together, and this is already a very interesting thing. And so the theme of the free time, which is, we can can see it could be interpreted as something fun, something light, something, I mean, a divertissement, but it was a quite aggressive critique on capitalism. So the idea is, what is your free time? It is the time that you have where you don't have to work. So pay attention. It could seem like a free time, but it is not so free. It is controlled as it is controlled the time where you work. So, I mean, I make it very simple. It was more sophisticated, but the idea was a little bit this. And again, it is interesting how the experimentation on themes affect the experimentation on space. Watch this amazing entrance to the exhibition. This is an installation which was the first thing that you encountered entering in the palace, which you cannot recognize anymore, because where is the palace that we saw at the beginning? Here, I don't know. And this is a section of a triangle, which with mirrors multiply and seems a sort of hexagon. And here there were video by Tinto Brass, which was an art director, a video maker, like intellectual video maker, that later became a porn director, more or less. So another interesting case. And there was two videos going simultaneously on the floor, but of course also on the other 6 faces of the space, of the kaleidoscope. One of the free time and the other of the time of work. And of course they were quite similar in rhythm, in activities of people. So the critique started in a very strong way. This is the big stairs that we saw before, completely deformed by this installation and this mirror. And this again that we already saw, it was in this exhibition. And here the participation of Brazil. The participation of Brazil is designed by a group coordinated by Lucio Costa, and was called Riposatevi, Descansem, or be quiet, I mean. And there was this hamaca, I don't know the name in English. And it was fun, apparently quite light. I have a video which is nice, which I show. Okay, very 60s. With this idea also a little bit fun of tradition, and this idea of, you know, the sea, but also more sophisticated idea of technique and structure, which are two things in which Lucio Costa worked a lot. So here you see a bit how does the structure work. Okay. Which is, I mean, it is apparently simple, but it is an interesting design because the weight of people tend the structure and make the shape of structure. So it is quite interesting from that point of view, and with the modularity. So reflection on space, quite sophisticated. And you know, this phrase that today sounds a little bit patronized, but quite interesting in his way, where he explained that it is a sort of irony where you have this idea of a lazy people, but also very cooperative. You know, we are in '64. Brasilia was built in 3 years in recent times. So it was a sort of demonstration of something in a light and not so light manner. And the exhibition was, I think, so effective in his way, so clever, that actually it was rebuilt. Maybe you had the occasion of visit some of these more recent version of it. And these are plans of the reconstruction in other situations. The first one is the original one at the Triennale. Here we are in 2010 in Brasilia at the MAM. Here we are in Venice. I do visit this. Maybe you, the Brazilian one, which I don't. But, and here is in Niteroi in 2018. Always with the same structure and idea. Very fun, I think, because super simple, just one thing, just two things. It is also design and architecture together, and also, of course, performative arts, and a space that changes with what you do inside. So here is in Niteroi, the bigger version of the installation. Nice also to understand how, of course, in the 60s, it could have this kind of meaning related to the construction of Brasilia, related with the time. And today we can see it in a quite different way. So something that continues his aim to evoking things. Then the third participation is, let's say, maybe less interesting. It is more traditional in terms of exhibition, because it was inside an exhibition talking about cities in the world, and it is a sort of survey on the urban land of Salvador de Bahia. So with, again, modernity, tradition, a mix of the two, but basically it wasn't an installation, it was an exhibition about Salvador de Bahia. Interesting because it brings several styles, and you know, Manaus, the Amazons, Minas Gerais, architecture that in that time could be interpreted as something that again became interesting after a period of modernism that were different, but also with interesting cases of architecture. So these are the three participation of Brazil to the international triennials, but of course, many architects participated in other exhibitions as a single designers. So I just wanted to end this survey through the participation of Brazil in the Triennale with, let's say, an homage to Humberto Fernando Campana, who were several times exhibited at the Triennale, and the last time with not the last time, but let's say the more important and complete time with this beautiful and quite big exhibition called Antibody. And so, yeah, I just wanted to mention that, remember also Fernando recently died, so with that. Here we are at the end of a first part of that, which was basically about the past. And now I would move to another part, to the future. I go ahead, or do you want to make a pause or a break or questions, or I go through? Can I? Okay, let's go. So for talking about the future, yeah, I basically have, would like to talk to you about, yes, sure. In person, because my best one is this one, but I wasn't born in 1964, so which I see, let me think, this is interesting. Well, the installation by Lucio Costa, I saw it at the biennial, so that I saw it, and I like it a lot. Recently, Broken Nature, I think it was a good exhibition. It is a quite hard question. I have to think about it, but maybe at the end, I will think about it, and I will answer to you at the end. So now I try to talk about two projects that I'm doing now. One is for an exhibition in 2024, and one this year, which will open in May. But for that, I restarted from the same biennial, which is quite interesting, for introducing the designer about the monographies on. So again, a video. I actually would like to, really wanted to visit that, but you know, this is something about exhibition that you cannot, if you didn't see it, like theater, it's something that, it is just a myth. So here there was the theme of holidays, again, with a mixture of light and not so light reflection on society, consuming society, and the economical boom. This, for instance, is a super interesting installation made with cars in a sort of traffic jam with light of cars hanged up, which was a sort of reflection of this idea that on Saturday morning, all the workers take the car and go out to the city for their free time. And, you know, skis, so sort of critic to the mass tourism, so of that conformity and idea of doing altogether always the same thing. And there was another amazing installation, which was just at the end of the tunnel with cars, which was made by Guy Aulenti, which is the designer for I'm working on, which was a total space. We are always inside that same space that we saw at the beginning. You are seeing, I mean, words, completely different words, but the space is always the same. And this is called the Run to the Sea. And Guy Aulenti took this figure painted by Picasso, multiplied with two mirrors, one on one side and one to the other, built up a sort of pavement with stairs, which multiplied again the space. You could be there together with them. Here we are in the tunnel of cars, if you remember the structure. And after the traffic jam of the Saturday morning, we finally arrived to the sea. And there is this explosion of joy in the running to the sea of these wonderful women with their hairs to the wind and this light. I have to say that when the Italian Design Day called me for being ambassador here, and I read about the theme, which Claudio was saying before, how was it? The quality that the light that illuminates, the energy of design for people and the environment. I mean, I was a little bit confused because it wasn't so clear, but I thought about this installation where we have light, and we have a light which is evoking a natural light, which is the light that we share all together, people and environment, as the topic said, and with a great explosion of energy. So I had to choose one image, and I sent this image. And I thought, okay, maybe it is a little bit out of topic, but it came to my mind, this image, and so this is what I choose. And this is her, Guy Aulenti, a very strange, interesting, sorry, architect, designer, loved and hated, quite well known in the world and quite not so loved in Italy for, I don't know, strange reasons. I think that one of her things was the charismatic behavior of, her charismatic behavior. And this is a quote, the tradition is not something that you have in legacy. It is something that you build every day of your life. And she always has been experimenting with several things and with several disciplines. And so, this is the exhibition I'm working on. It's called The Words of Guy And it will be done in a sort of So here I tell you also a little bit of work in progress, let's say how the work is going. I'm curating the exhibition with Giovanni Agosti, who is an art critic, very, I mean, you know, with his ideas, very straight, so it is also a quite interesting people to work with. And his idea was to create 10 environment, total environment, in which you could have the complete perception of space. And then we have another path where you will see her biography with the relationship, because one of her more interesting things were the relationship built with the world of art and architecture and theater, and we will see it. So she was, we also have to say, because it is quite important, one of the very few women in a history of design and architecture in the 60s and 50s. And she arrived in Milan from Piedmont, Turin, not so far, but from another place, just after the war. We already talked about that period a bit, but the 50s were for Milan a very strong and strange period for creativity, because the city was distraught, was completely with a lot of problems, a lot of holes, literally holes, and it was a moment where the creativity of engineers, so the techniques and intellectual thinkers, designers, were meant to all together for rebuilding the city. And so it is from that period that the Italian design that we nowadays already know, all over the world, here of course as well, was born. Thinking about how to rebuild an environment that was, you see, the black parts are holes. And this is just the very, very center, but there was much, much more. And it was interesting because they decided all together how to rebuild the city, always with this sort of question, what do you have to do? What do we have to do to rebuild as it was and where it was in identical condition, or to rebuild something new, something modern? And here I brought 3 pictures from a book which lay in the archive by Gaio Lenti, but it was a book made by the municipality, in which there is a comparison between 1945 and 1955, so 10 years, in which the city was quite rebuilt. But the interesting thing is that sometimes it is identical. This is the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele. And sometimes it was the substitution with a modern building, completely different, with a new thing, completely different. So again, this is Filarete Ospedale, the university, like we are here in Milan, it is that. That, for instance, it used to be an hospital, and after the war, with the restoration, wonderful, was transformed into the university. And here, for instance, it is a building that were already modern, built by Gio Ponti, rebuilt in the same manner. So it was a moment in which the idea of all the new, modern tradition exploded into the minds of architects and designers. And yeah, I do believe that that was the beginning of the Italian design. And Gaio Lenti was also involved in the magazines, which is something very important for her career. She started to work in Casabella. I don't know if it's a magazine which is no in all over the world. Yes or no? Okay. I think maybe in the 70s was quite. And working in magazine, Gaio Lenti made the graphic design of the magazine. And for her was important because, you know, doing a magazine, I also worked in magazines, so I'm interested in the theme, but it's useful because you have the occasion of put together a big quantity of material and trying to do it clear, to make it speak clearly. So I think it was a gym for thinking about design, very strong. And she worked on Casabella, then she worked in Lotus, doing this. These are two houses published in Lotus, but also in the same magazine. This is a survey with pictures by Gaolenti made in Tokyo, in Hong Kong, talking about the condition of housing. So it is another way of doing research through photography, through traveling as well. That were used beside the proper architecture. Here we already saw it. And it was this fun, if you want, idea for the Italian designers of that period, that a designer would have the capability of designing from the spoon to the city. This is the well-known phrases that you have to design from the spoon to the city. And here's a catalog on the work of Gaolenti with this kind of irony where a fork is laid out beside a project for sort of urban project that I found was fun. And this is something very typical of Italian design because in many other important schools of design like Ulm, like the Bauhaus, like, of course, the US, UK as well. You had a completely separate career between product design and architecture. In Italy, the first graduation school for design were, I don't know in Brazil. In Brazil, when were the first graduation in design? Around the 50s. Okay, in Italy, it is at the end of the 90s. So for all that period, all the designers that we know were just architects. There weren't this separation of careers. And these are other interesting projects that Gaolenti started to do as an interior designer. This is the house of Gianni Agnelli, the owner of the Fiat, so a super rich and power man with this collection of work of art, very interesting. And she designed a sort of hybrid situation between a set of theater, an installation, and a house. Okay, but it is something interesting in his way of thinking about the project in a very interdisciplinary way. And she was also art director for several firms of furniture and other things. In that case, she was nominated as art director at this Fly Center, and she decided to build up the first, say, supermarket of furniture for more popular, more for the people. And so she went in America, and she studied how does it work, because in Italy it was completely different. And she ended up with this very pop idea of building spaces with a repetition of things, with the object that designed the sort of theater setup that you could, here it is not a good image, but this is a sort of living room. You could sit there and being in this sort of conversation with these other objects that were in the background, and optical backgrounds for evoking the shapes of chairs. And here again, a mixture between graphic design, set design, space, and this chair that is a sort of line. So it is a sort of graphic design made in 3 dimensions. I go a little bit through because, sort of reinterpretation of the traditional shape of armchair, and of course also quote of Surrealism of Marcel Duchamp with his table on wheels. And then the thing for what I think that Gaulenti is more famous in the world, which are the lights that were actually always designed for environments at first. So she rarely designed things as an object, but always as something in relationship in an environment with for making something happening. So this was designed for a shop, Olivetti showroom, in Buenos Aires, and that's the lamp. And you see, the designer of the showroom was a sort of urban space, and you had the possibility of sit down here beside the objects, and was quite quite strange experience. And the lamps, which is called pipistrello, bat. Anyway, that animal it is an object that is, if you see it, it is also ugly somehow, has something disturbing, something strange, but because it was something for catching attention and make something happen. So it was a sort of performative situation of theater. This is for another showroom, another lamp made by just this slab of light. And always you see the lamp is a sort of the center of history that's going all around, multiplying the space in a very strange environment. This is again another one, Jova, very beautiful lamp, which is a sort of, not really a lamp, but more an object that stayed there. You can put inside some plants, and it is always something that makes all the environment change. You put that in the center of the room, and the room completely changed. This is her house in Milan. And then I wanted to also to show you some of her works for theater, which is maybe the last known part of her work, but super interesting. She worked a lot with Luca Ronconi, who is this theater director, and for La Scala, for the bigger theater in Italy, but with very, very experimental ideas of space and moving space. This is something that I think interesting for putting together design, architecture, and performative arts. And she worked a lot on it. I cannot explain you every project, but I just go through for seeing how experimentation is in that work. This is, for instance, a sort of warehouse that they occupy, that they catch up in the province of Tuscany for making experimentation with laboratory and workshops. They used to live all together there, to work all together like 24/7, always, for building space and narration together in a participatory way. And here you see very architectonical set design, but also with always a surrealistic touch. I go quite quickly, but I think they are very interesting. This is my favorite one, with a vertical table and the actors hanged for dining all together on the wall. Okay, I go through, I continue, okay? Last one, so we are almost there. This is the other exhibition I'm working on, and which will open sooner, let's say, on May 2023. And as it will open in 2023, which is, as I was saying, the center of Triennale, it is an exhibition on somehow the Triennale itself through the theme of home. So the idea was to talking about the evolution of the home, starting from the archives of Triennale, which of course bring together a center of history of changing in society as we saw, and to make it in a dialogue with contemporary architects that are setting up also new part of the exhibition. So it is in part a collage exhibition on exhibitions on the home. So it is a reflection of home through the exhibitions of home, and of course also dialogue between the two. There is also a theme that that came up a little bit through the lines, so it is not so explicit, but it is quite strong. This is the image of the cover of the catalog. We are designing with Norm, which is a dust cleaner. So what does make you think about? I try to, it is strange when you see all the archives of the Triennale starting from the 20th century, you see how society changed and how many questions of our behavior changed. So nowadays, some things looks really strange when you see at the archive. For instance, all the openings of all the exhibitions are with you see the picture of the opening, and they are always only men, always. And then you have images where you see the houses, people inside the house, the kitchen, the new object for doing, and there you see always only women. This is something that just came up looking through the archives. So I decided to give a sort of reading quite related to this idea of the care of home, which is something that I think it is quite contemporary, but also always been there. But now we can see it with new eyes, with the fresh eyes. So here, I don't know, it is stretch the image, okay. I don't know why it was in a different way, but anyway, it doesn't matter. It is on the curved space of the building, and we have 9 site-specific installations. These are made by contemporary architects, which are developing project and researches on the contemporary topic. And we have 4 thematic islands from the Triennale archives, which are on 4 themes. The first one is gender, a little bit the thing that I was mentioned. The second one is the idea of leisure, which talk about somehow the passage through the idea of comfort, which was like just the armchair with a comfortable shape, to a more wide idea of relax and control of the free time. Quite interesting as well. Then there is the idea of nature inside the home. So the plants inside the home and the relationship with nature through the windows. And the last one is about windows and how windows separate the interior to the exteriors. And these are the archive part. Then we have one reenactment. I will show it. The set design is made by a young firm from Italy. And we developed together this idea, which I think is quite domestic, of reusing and rearranging. As when you change house, maybe you have your table, you bring it, and maybe you also have an armchair from your grandmother that you don't want to live in the old apartment. So you rearrange the things that you already have. And here we decided to reuse tables and parts of previous set designs for previous exhibitions and to rearrange it. And so they are working in this sort of collage, the previous parts, which is something that we are very used to see in the domestic space, but not so much in the space of a museum. And then in the beginning of the exhibition opened with a work of art of this wonderful American artist, which is now quite old, but still alive and super strong, which is a manifesto of care, where she talked about something that she called maintenance art. She worked on maintenance art also in the museum, in the Brooklyn Museum in particular, where she said, okay, I make maintenance art 1 hour every day. And these are all images of her work of cleaning the museum, taking care of the museum. So she was there, cleaning up the stairs at the entrance of the museum, or other works that she did, as for instance, the time that every day she take for dress and undress her child. And so this is something that opened the exhibition with this topic. Yeah, I forgot, Mille Lederman Ukles is her name. Then we start showing things from the archives of Triennale. We have this sculpture that lays on the archives, on the warehouse of Triennale, which are female faces. We don't know who they are, but we will put it on the beginning of the exhibition, together with objects from the collection of the Design Museum, but all related with the care of the house, which I think it is a quite interesting collection of things. Then we have the archive part, which I already mentioned. For instance, the idea of how the kitchen changed through the centuries, and so how the kitchen were at the beginning a segregated and separated part of the house, where basically women were stuck, let's say stuck down, and then became a more open and different part, more related with the life of the house. Here is the other historical chapter related with leisure. It's called Leisure Home. And here, for instance, there are several crossing themes. One, it is the discourse about the care of the body that starts from the 30s with an idea very related with the fascist values of, the man, the physical, strong man. This is a project by Franco Albini, very beautiful and interesting, but very fascist in his value. And this is a project made for the Triennale in 1987 by Rem Koolhaas, Oma, which is referred a bit to Albini, and it's called the bodybuilding house, when you have these tools for a practices gym in the house, but of course it is quite a dystopic environment of a domestic space that is completely mad and uncomfortable, but it's just something to make gym and working around the body. Or, again, in the same chapter, we have this idea of holidays. So some of the houses that I will mention built up in the garden of the Triennale as holidays houses with objects from the archive related to camping and so on. Here the chapter on the nature, again from the 30s, so very decorative way of seeing plants, to the more recent research on the oxygen that can be purified by plants. And here is the chapter about the window with very interesting experimental project by Umberto Riva or Diller Scofidio. This is a piece designed by Diller Scofidio in 1987 that I discovered, which is still stocked in the archives, so it will be reset up, and I'm very happy to that. Then we will have a selection of an exhibition made by the Canadian Centre of Architecture, which was about the changing in society. So we will bring a part of the exhibition at the beginning. This is the work that Mayo, a Spanish architect, is developing, and it is interesting because it is in a very close relation with the work on the archive of Triennale, and this is her research on the communal kitchen, which are spaces all over the world where women cook together, and it is a sort of inversion of what happened before. So before, the kitchen was a separate space inside the house where the women were lonely and closed there. And in that research, kitchens are public, facing the street, in shops through the streets, where women get together, share the activity of cooking together, and it became a sort of emancipation tool for going out from the houses, being together, and being public. So for making public the idea of feeding people, not just in the families, but in a more complex and communal community situation. This is the work that are proposing Assemble. They are a collective based in London, and they work all together as a collective. There are 20, and they propose to build up a table which would be basically their dining table and at the same time their working table. So they will bring a table with dishes made by hand by them, and the idea is that living and working can be part of the same activity. I think that all the installation will help me, let's say, to say what I would like to say, which is that the designing of the house, it is not just made by lines that you can trace on a paper, but it's how do you behave inside the house? What do you do for maintaining the house? When you live in a house, you're already transforming it, so you are designing it. And these are, let's say, contribution, talking about it. This is the research. You see, they are very different, but they share this mood of trying to be more open, thinking about the house. This is a research made by Dogma, who is a collective, let's say, of Italian architects based in Belgium. They found this typology that they call the long house, which is curiously similar in many parts of the world, starting from the Polynesia to the US to also the Netherlands, which are houses very long in which there is no separation between the domestic space, the working space, and also the religious space. So they are at the same time temple, workshop for working, and housing for living, without private property and with a complete sense of building the community together. And it is just something that led us think that maybe the apartment in which we are used to think that the house is, it is not exactly the only thing that can be a house. This is one of my best. It is the Parliaments of Plants, where Céline Bauman, a French landscape designer, set up a selection of plants for interior, and she tried to define their rights. So she's trying to say these poor plants, they are not just objects, they are alive. And so she designed this discussion between plants, and also discourse that, of course, is something true in Italy, but in Europe and in all the continental countries and Western countries, that for being grown in the house, the plants that you have in the apartments need to be from warm climates. And so they are usually, she called it colonial botany because they came from countries where the climate is different. So she traced all the history of the plants through their journeys from all over the world to the apartment of our bourgeois homes in Europe. Then we end with two architects and their work. This is Maria Giuseppina Grasso Cannizzo. She's an Italian architect, quite interesting, that worked with the tools of restoration in doing architecture. What do I mean? For instance, this was a school, and she transformed it into a house, just restoring, so leaving the space as it was, but make it, of course, possible to inhabit in. So it is the idea of transformation and the idea that the same thing that I was trying to say related to Assemble, that when you're inhabiting a place, you're already transforming that place, and you're building up your house while you inhabit it, even if it is a school. And yeah, and the exhibition end up with a project that maybe is the more complex, and it is a bit trying to make a sort of conclusion, which is the work by Lacaton Vassal, which are French architects that they won the last Pritzker Prize, not the previous one, because yesterday Chipperfield won the last one. And they again work on the idea of transformation of houses, not demolishing a building that they are obsolete, but transforming, adding a sort of glass house, a sort of extra part that make the space more livable. So the part of the installation will be made by just images before and after. These are the picture of the houses before the intervention, and this is what happened after the intervention, where the inhabitants had the possibility of staying there without moving during all the period of transformation. So yeah, I think it is a very clever strategy, and it is the last thing that you will see in the exhibition. And with that, I finished. Thank you very much.